All right, I think we'll get started. Thank you everyone who's on our Zoom call, and if anyone is on Facebook, for joining us. My name is Avi Gordon, and I have the honor and privilege of serving as the Executive Director of Alums for Campus Fairness. And obviously we're here during some trying times. A lot of things have happened on campuses throughout this pandemic, and unfortunately things have not quieted down. I'd like to, before we get started, to welcome all of you and to welcome one of our fabulous chapter leaders, Naomi Reinharz from Brown, who's here with us as well to have a little bit of a conversation about our recent project that we came out with called Guide to Protect Jewish Students, that's been covered by dozens of different places and different areas, and we're really proud of the work that we've done, which has been quite extensive. So thank you all, and Naomi, thank you for being here with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Great. So so obviously what we did as in our Guide to Protect Jewish Students is we outlined 50 of the most flagrant exhibits of anti-Semitism that transpired at universities across the country over the past 3 years. At Alums for Campus Fairness, we work diligently with our many partners from across the spectrum within the pro-Israel campus community. And we've learned, after working with many of our partners, about a lot of these egregious activities. And so we decided to compile them, put them all together under one roof, and to kind of share what we learned and what we saw in this guide. What we've done is the report divides all these occurrences into 5 categories. It includes concrete recommendations and steps that alumni can take to combat this hate. You can go on our website at campusfairness.org and take a look at the physical Guide to Protect Jewish Students. It's about 20 pages, but it's quite thorough, and we're thankful to all of our partners with whom we've worked, and obviously to Amcha Initiative, which we're very close with. So before we move any further, I want to share our video explainer to kind of put into words even better than what I already have. I think you need to unmute it, Joel.
Considered myself a very confident person, but my last 2 years in college completely broke me. My Jewish identity became controversial. There was one night when I was leaving a student government town hall, and I started getting surrounded by anti-Israel students. They started shouting horrible things at me, comparing me to Nazis for being a Zionist. When we had the physical assault and the flag burning, I'd say that was the tipping point. I think that at that point you can justify the fear that we felt was rising.
Great. Quite a riveting video, I'm sure, as you all may feel. And we feel very fortunate that we're able to share and to shed light on what's going on campuses. Adela, who you saw speak, who was a former student at NYU, is now a member of our Alums for Campus Fairness chapter at NYU. And she's been really a warrior and a champion for what we're trying to do. So as it mentioned, the video mentioned, we worked with AMCHA Initiative's database, which is a great plethora of knowledge. Tammy Ross-Benjamin is a close ally of ours. She spoke at our inaugural conference last year, and we were thrilled to be able to shed light on what she was able to kind of compile. These examples selected stood out as a painful chronicle of hatred because of the magnitude of their impact, the virulence of the hatred they represented, and the egregiousness of their timing and performance. I mean, when a student feels threatened on campus, it's unacceptable, and that's where alumni have to come in and have to say so. Many times we found that administrations aren't aware about the severity of what's going on in campuses, and that's our role as alumni is amongst many other things, is to have those conversations, and that's what we have done at ACF. We've been able to bring alumni together under one roof as a unified alumni voice to counter bigotry, and also our leadership has been able to have these conversations. Some universities made the list many times or have departments that are particularly problematic, but almost no university is free of any type of this hate. It's becoming a lot more commonplace. We're seeing it behind the screens. There is mentioned in the video about Zoom bombing, which is a little bit of an odd occurrence, but what it means is when a presentation or a program is happening on Zoom, someone will come on Zoom and try to attack and try to interrupt and say hateful things on the Zoom to interrupt the conversation. So it's quite upsetting, needless to say, but we are here to take a stand for that. So with all of this, with all this being said, we wanted to kind of have a little bit of a question conversation and have any of you who have any questions to be able to ask it to us. But when we're discussing anti-Semitism, it's important that we have a consensus on how we define anti-Semitism. Specifically, this report records incidents considered anti-Semitic under the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's working definition of anti-Semitism. And that states anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred towards Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed towards Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, toward Jewish community institutions and religious facilities. So the IHRA definition is incredibly important. And Naomi, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on the IHR definition, how it's important in this fight against campus anti-Semitism. If you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I think, just by way of background, I've been the chapter leader for Brown, I think for 2 or 3 years, and happy to speak about my experience as a student. I know I graduated in 2003, so obviously things have changed a lot since then. We didn't have social media. We didn't have a lot of the things that we have now. So I'm feeling kind of old. But in terms of the definition, I think it's super important that, we work hard as a group, as well as, within our specific chapters on our college campuses, to make sure the definition is accepted and is understood widely. A lot of people don't understand why it's important to adopt this definition, just like they don't understand the definition of Zionism, and they don't understand that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, and there's a lot of things that are misunderstood. And so trying to, be patient and explain without judgment, without getting angry, without getting worked up, just really meet people where they are at their level of understanding of these definitions, and if need be, go into more depth and make ourselves available to make this definition much more widely accepted.
100%, I agree with you. I think meeting them on their level, I think, is really important because many don't understand the severity of anti-Semitism, the virulence, and how it's really seeping in a lot of different ways and instances on campuses. And when students feel like they're being threatened and they say, this is anti-Semitic, and the administration kind of flip-flops and how they feel about it. If we are able to have a hard definition, which is this IHRA definition, then there's no ifs, ands, or buts. This is the definition. This is what it means. And if something happens on campus, the administration has this tool to use to be able to take a stand when something like this does happen. It's difficult, but we've found that many countries have adopted this definition. Some universities have, and some are still working on it. And in fact, one of our student, one of our partners organizations, Students Supporting Israel, is having an entire IHRA conference on how to work with students to get their student governments and universities to adopt the definition. We saw this happen at Florida State University over the summer, where the student senate president, had many anti-Semitic and anti-Zionist remarks on social media and whatnot. And he was let go of his position. But not only that, ACF came in. We brought together hundreds of alumni with many of our partners to express the outrage about what happened with the student senator. And we asked for the student senate to adopt the IHRA definition. And they did. And I think that that's an incredibly important step that we took. And we're very proud of taking that step. But we're not at the finish line yet, right? There's still a lot more schools to do it, and it should be a unifying thing that all alumni can help dispel, and can, Naomi, like you said, speak on everyone's level and be able to have a conversation that's not that's free of judgment. So our next question is, the number of anti-Semitic incidents in the U.S. has risen sharply over the last few years. The ADL, Anti-Defamation League, audit of anti-Semitic incidents jumped from just under 1,300 incidents nationwide in 2016 to just under 2,000 incidents in 2017, a 57% increase. The number climbed another 12% from 2018 to 2019. How has the increase in anti-Semitic hate affected Jewish students and allies on campus? Now, Naomi, I know that you're not a student anymore, but I also know how involved you are with Brown in working with the Hillel and perhaps different student groups. I'm curious your thoughts on if you've seen this increase in hate and how it's affected students and allies on campus or professionals on campus.
Sorry, can you repeat the last part?
Sure. If you've seen an increase in this, the increase in hate that we're seeing, have you seen this impact on Jewish students or allies on campus, or even professionals with whom you've worked?
So when I was at Brown, I started a group called Brown Students for Israel. That was in 2002 and 2003, and I've had the pleasure of staying in touch with a lot of the people who were active then, and people who then graduated and took over. And actually, one of my last trips pre-COVID was to APAC last March, so almost a year ago, where I got to meet with some of the current BSI leaders. And, I've been able to stay in touch with some of them on social media and email. If any of you are on the call today, I would love to interact with you more regularly and really hear what's going on and be a resource if I can. Brown's a complicated campus, as I'm sure many of you know. It's far left, the vast majority. When I started at Brown, I considered myself a liberal, and like many people had the unfortunate experience of being told I wasn't liberal because I was pro-Israel. So what I've seen on campus is, a lot of people who, like me, were liberal and wanted to support many liberal causes, found themselves shunned from a lot of groups that didn't want Zionists, didn't want pro-Israel people, and sometimes equated all Jews with Zionists and with people they didn't want associated. So it's been a struggle. There's been a lot of articles written both by students and friends of students to try to condemn this and to try to make a change. So, I had a conversation last week, I think actually, with the current rabbi on campus. There is a lot of optimism despite all that. And obviously a lot of the in-person, hate and negative activity has stopped with COVID, with just less physical interactions on campus, obviously, right now. So less opportunity for in-person, negative interactions to be happening. But I think there's sort of cautious optimism. People don't want to give up on Brown. They want to make Brown better and stronger. Parents want to be able to send their kids there and feel hopeful and feel confident that their kids will have a good experience there. It's a wonderful school. It's one of the top schools. It should remain as such, but we're trying to do the best we can to make it a safe space for all students, so that's a quick summary. I'm sure there's a lot I'm missing, but that's, I'm friends with a lot of the alumni who are on the Brown Hillel board, and it's sort of like you have two choices. You can either walk away and say, screw this, I'm not associating with Brown anymore, it's a lost cause, or you can try to make it better and stronger. And I think that's what we're trying to do.
For sure. You brought up a good point about parents, being worried about sending their kids to school, and what that climate is like. And we get that question a lot. Many of our members of different chapters are parents of current students. In fact, at Tufts University, the Jewish Insider, which is a daily newspaper about the ins and outs, daily newsletter about the ins and outs of what's going on in the Jewish community, had a whole article about Tufts University and the pro-Israel student trying to be pushed out of student government. It's a whole conversation for another time, because we can talk about it for hours. But the point of me saying that is that the mother of the student is actually our chapter leader at Tufts University, and she is not happy about what's going on at Tufts, rightfully so. And she's leading our chapter and leading the way, and she's hearing from her son, and we're hearing from, obviously, our different partners on the ground. And it's important that parents are intimately involved in what's going on as well. Most of these schools are great schools, and have great potential, but when something happens on campus and gets ignored, or gets inflated into something bigger than it has to be because of the detractors, it's something where it's important for us to stand up and to take a stand. So moving right along, obviously campuses have closed when COVID started in the spring, almost a year ago, which is hard to believe. And then when school went back in the fall, nearly half of colleges began their fall semester entirely or primarily online. But anti-Semitism continued offline and online. As we mentioned, the Amcha Initiative, which is a nonprofit dedicated to documenting anti-Semitic activity on U.S. campuses, they logged over 130 incidents since the middle of March of last year at private and public universities across the country. And the question that we have is, has anti-Semitism evolved in light of the lack of in-person campus life? I'll just take a stab at this quickly, and that is that we've seen it has. Our professional staff has seen a dramatic rise in what we mentioned before, Zoom bombings or anti-Semitic or hateful tweets, rhetoric, etc. It's easier to intimidate behind a keyboard than it is in person. And so with that, we're seeing the students and even faculty, at Johns Hopkins, a TA took a poll and said, should I grade Zionists differently? Something to that effect. And that's not okay. And I don't know if that would necessarily happen if students were actually physically in the classroom, and the TA would recognize that these are actual students, actual human beings who are trying to get an education, and instead they're being mocked and attacked because of what they believe in, and that is the Jewish state, and that is having our Jewish homeland. And it's incredibly upsetting, and I think we're seeing that campus life kind of shifting, and it'll be interesting to see, come the fall of 2021, when hopefully things kind of get a little bit more back to a semblance of normalcy, what that will look like, and if that will change. Hopefully it will, because unfortunately a lot of students are feeling attacked. Naomi, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, I think that's right. And I was at the conference last year, again right before COVID, in LA in February, and it was really, really helpful for me to, for the first time, have I hate using the word safe space, but it kind of is a safe space, for other alumni from other schools, some of whom I know, some of whom I didn't know, all of whom had very, very different experiences on their college campuses and very different campus environments, but all were trying to make, an important difference as alumni, some young, some much older, some campuses that didn't have a lot of anti-Israel stuff going on, some that did. I think we can all learn from each other. And I think it's never too early to sort of be prepared. You know, sometimes campuses can be very quiet and not a lot of anti-Israel stuff is happening, which is great, but you never know when the next, you know, God forbid, swastika or anti-Israel incident or letter to the editor or whatever it might be might happen. And I think we need to sort of have our ammunition ready and have a cohort of, you know, people who are mobilized to react. And I think another thing that I was talking about with Rabbi Bolton last week is, you know, we need to find a way to not only be reactive and only be on the defensive. I think it's really, really important. One thing I tried to do with BSI is to be proactively pro-Israel, you know, not only be there as sort of like, you know, no, we're not bad people and sort of defend ourselves and look sort of weak or look defensive, but really be out there proudly and loudly in support of Israel and not be shy about it. So I do think that this year has sort of been a reset button for a lot of organizations and a lot of campuses, as we're not physically in person, but hopefully COVID will end and hopefully we'll be back on campus. And I think, you know, things will start ramping up sooner rather than later. And so we need to be prepared for that.
100%, I agree, and thanks for mentioning about our conference. You know, we're working on putting a conference together virtually in the coming months so that we can reconvene virtually, but again, share what we all have learned with each other and hear from different experts and create that community again, because I think we all learned a lot during that time. I'm glad that you were there as well. So moving on, in December 2019, there was an executive order on combating anti-Semitism that called government agencies to consider the IHRA's working definition of anti-Semitism when evaluating Title VI complaints, stating that discrimination against Jews may give rise to a Title VI violation when this discrimination is based on individuals' race, color, and national origin. And so, you know, we're bringing up what has the effect been on campus anti-Semitism since the signing of the executive order. And I think that we've seen some great cases. You know, again, Adela, who was in our video, she filed a complaint with NYU for discrimination. I mean, we're not talking just like a public event, like she mentioned in the video, where a pro-Israel rally was being held during Israel's Independence Day for fun. This was actually also personal attacks because she believed in Israel and was loud and proud, like Naomi mentioned, to be on the proactive side of things. And unfortunately, she was being discriminated against, and so she used Title VI action to stand up for herself, and she's gotten a lot of press on it, and there's a lot of investigations going on, and I think it's a great step forward. And, you know, I think it's a tool for students to use. There's plenty of organizations who work with lawyers. I mean, last week we had the president of the Louis D. Brandeis Center for Human Rights, Eliza Lewin, speak. She was excellent and fabulous and incredibly helpful from a lawyer's perspective. And we also, you know, there's the Stand With Us Side Off Legal Department. There's a Lawfare Project. I mean, all these organizations have worked together in countering this through a legal perspective, and I think it's important. Similarly, you know, to me, it's another tool to be used, just like adopting the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, just like, you know, students feeling comfortable to speak out about what's going on. This is another tool in their toolbox to be able to use, which is the Title VI complaint that's now being able to be used. So I see that we have a question from Naomi Friedman. She said, in addition to the important push for IHRA adoption, are we supporting or encouraging students to file complaints with the Department of Education in cases where the university hasn't responded? And the short answer is we are. You know, we are absolutely supporting students when they feel like they're being marginalized, and, you know, a lot of different paths that have been walked, but nothing has actually been solved. You know, they've tried to talk to the administration and try and talk to these different departments within the administration to get this resolved, and it's kind of been ignored or fallen on deaf ears. Of course, we encourage it. We also encourage, I would say equally on the alumni end, is for alumni to to spread awareness about what's going on. So we'll create a petition or create a letter writing campaign, or have our alumni talk directly to the administration about what's going on, so they understand the severity of this from an alumni perspective. I mean, alumni, as we all know, are incredibly important influencers for the university, and it's important that we voice that as well. So Title VI is an interesting tool that we can use. It's not foolproof. It has to be used diligently and strategically, but it's certainly something that can be utilized. Naomi, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Not to that particular question. Thanks.
Okay. So now we're going to zoom in, obviously, on Brown University. Naomi, your alma mater, which you mentioned before. Last year in March, the Advisory Committee on Corporate Responsibility, they published a report recommending the university president adopt BDS. Over the last 11 months, ACF at Brown has been working with the Hillel and Chabad at Brown to ensure that the students have alumni support in the aftermath of BDS. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened, how the campus climate changed for Jewish students and allies, how that's evolved since then? I'd love to hear your perspective.
Sure. So, I have to credit Avi and Joel. They really are the ones who do the work. We're just there to say yes and no, and write letters and help where we can. But this was not the first time that students on campus tried to pass resolutions like this and make life difficult for students and for the administration. I do think that Christina Paxton, the current Brown University president, who by the way is a convert to Judaism, has been very amenable, agreeable, helpful. I would say she's a partner for us. She's not an impediment. And we do have some very strong alumni, both on the Brown Hillel board and others who have used their influence. And one thing that, is sort of sad but true is that you can have many, many sort of, I don't want to say uninfluential, but, less powerful alumni voices who maybe don't have the financial influence or political influence. But if you can get some really big names who are alumni of Brown or whatever school to call the president, to make their voice heard, and really threaten.
I think we lost you there. I'll just pick up where Naomi left off, and that is, that having our voices heard is incredibly important. BDS is something that's been around for just about a decade now, where our detractors we're seeing are going to student government trying to get BDS to pass, which is the boycott, divestments, and sanctions. Trying to get the universities to adopt it, which no university, even if it is passed on a student government, no university has actually divested their funds from Israeli sources, etc. It's really kind of a tactic to shed light on what they think are violations of the university. It's totally political theater, and doesn't work. What it does do, however, is make students feel uncomfortable for the pro-Israel community feeling uncomfortable because they're being attacked, they feel violated. It can get very emotional. I've been in those settings where students get quite emotional because they feel like they're being personally attacked for what they believe in, and it's quite a challenge. It's quite a challenge for many students to be able to come up as a challenge because the professionals on the ground, the Hillels, the Chabads on campuses, they're focused on many other things on top of Israel. And then when something like this happens, everything is turned upside down, and it's hard because it's not just, okay, we defeated BDS on campus or BDS passed on campus. There's then this healing that has to happen on campus because students feel attacked and unsafe and unhappy once this is over. And it's quite disturbing to see. And I think that Jewish students and allies, they come together during BDS, which is incredibly important. But when they hear support from alumni, I think that really helps, especially in these last 4 years that ACF has really turned on the heat. When students hear from us here, and by us, I mean the chapters, and they see that there's a petition that getting hundreds of signatures, they feel that support and they appreciate it, and they feel like they can really project themselves and move forward, and that they're doing the right thing. It's an important step that we're taking with BDS, and unfortunately, it's something that we're still seeing happening across the country, and something that we're trying to continue to combat as we move forward. I mean, there was at Columbia University, there was going to be a referenda on BDS during the height of the scare of COVID-19, which was, in the springtime, which was egregious, and especially because no students were there to physically vote or anything. So it's constantly an issue that comes up, and it's constantly a tactic of our detractors to be able to utilize this. So moving on, we see that there's another question that someone's niece was Zoom bombed during her talk at an interfaith Zoom conference with F the Jews. I think it's at University of Victoria. She noticed that another Zoom bomb incident had occurred at a Canadian university the day before. Is there some combined effort to figure out who is behind this? Can we ask universities to begin to share data on this? It's a great question. Zoom bombing was a huge issue in the beginning of the pandemic when everyone went on to Zoom. One of the things that we're proud of at ACF is that we used Zoom for actually a couple of years before, when we had quarterly webinars. And so we were intimately familiar with the ins and outs of how Zoom works. And unfortunately, in the beginning, Zoom was so overwhelmed with their popularity, because this was a medium that everyone can use and can be seen and whatnot. They didn't have the best security, so that really anyone can make up a URL and can come in. Fast forward to now, there are way less ways for a detractor or someone who wants to rile up the community to come into a Zoom room, right? So for example, if we have a meeting on Zoom, we have to allow those people into the room, and we can easily kick them out and whatnot. So there's better tools that Zoom itself has to be able to stop and to counter this action from happening. It does still happen from time to time, unfortunately, but I'm not sure that we can collect the data. I don't know if the universities even have the data. I mean, the best tactic to do is to obviously kick them out of the room, and then to talk about what just happened and how this hatred is being spread out. Sometimes it's not. It's just it's kids being kids and just trying to stir the pot. But sometimes it's certainly vitriol and unacceptable. So it's quite hard to be able to just find and collect this data. Again, we saw the Zoom bombings happening a lot more in the beginning of the pandemic, as opposed to where we are today, which is good, but it's still something that we need to be a part of. I think, Naomi, you just came back and were able to join us again. I don't know if you want to pick up where you left off about BDS. Naomi? Okay, well, we'll keep moving on. But I want to say that, at Alums for Campus Fairness, we recognize that alumni represent a powerful and previously untapped force that can change campus norms. In my experience as an alum, even, I found the most effective way to combat anti-Semitism and advocate for Jewish students is to talk about what's going on in campuses. I think we all can feel that way. We're all outraged when things happen, and it's not the alma mater that we recognize. For wherever we went to school, from Binghamton University in upstate New York to UCLA in Los Angeles, to University of Washington in Seattle, to Florida State University, like I mentioned before. I mean, these schools are fabulous pillars of education, but when something happens on campus, if something happens on campus, we need to stand up and we need to share what's going on with our peers, with our alumni peers as well. when things happen on campus, we're more than happy to share what's going on. You'll get emails from our professional staff about what's happening on campuses, but then share that email with your peers. Share that email with what's going on to your peers on campuses. I think it's really important that we spread the wealth of what's going on, because if we don't, there won't be a change. The power is in the numbers, I think, and I think anti-Semitism, unfortunately, is unacceptable. So I know that Naomi, I'm not sure if you're able to.
Yeah, I apologize. I was having issues with internet.
No worries. So I know you were talking about BDS. We can go back to it and continue the conversation there.
Can you, what's the prompt?
Sure. It was about your experience in encountering BDS and last year, and what you feel like is happening today, how students are feeling, in fact, and staff that you worked with.
Well, I do, sort of like I was saying before, I think COVID obviously was, the unexpected, unprecedented sort of, I don't know, in a way it had some pros, like I said, because you couldn't have direct interactions on campus and direct anti-Semitic attacks. People weren't putting swastikas as much on buildings because no one was going to buildings and congregating anywhere. And there weren't in-person meetings, there weren't in-person, religious events and things like that. So in a way, campuses, not only at Brown, but around the country, have been quiet, and around the world. But like I said, there's, I know that groups are working behind the scenes, they're planning, they're congregating. In a way, COVID has also been helpful to BDS, because suddenly everyone's on Zoom and the phone all day long, planning, plotting, organizing for when they are in person, and organizing things like Zoom bombing. I mean, I was Zoom bombed at my organization. I work for a pro-Israel organization professionally. We were Zoom bombed recently. And this kind of stuff can happen at any time. Luckily, it was only a small meeting, but God forbid when it happens at a big gala or, certain venues, it can be really problematic. So all the things that this organization does and others do, and I think it's so important when organizations actually talk to each other. I think it's really great that ACF has many partners, from Stand With Us to, across the spectrum. I think there's so many organizations that are working to fight anti-Semitism and anti-Israel activity, and they should not work in silos. They should work in partnership and not duplicate or replicate, but really partner together to combat these things. And like I said, some students are on campus, other students will be going back to campus soon. I have a cousin I'm very close to who's starting at WashU and next year, and I worry that a lot of people are just unprepared. When I started at Brown in 1999, I thought I was extremely well versed. I was an Israeli citizen. I spoke Hebrew. I lived in Israel. My father was Israeli. Like, I went to Jewish day school. Like, what more could you want, from someone? And yet I got to campus not really having any tools and real knowledge of how to combat anti-Israel activity. And I was really shocked when I got to campus, because I was surprised at how unprepared I was. So I think both as alumni and as students, and working with high school students before they get to college, COVID is sort of a blip in the journey of a lot of our lives. And I think pretty soon we'll be back and dealing with the same kind of stuff we were dealing with before. And some of our enemies will be very prepared to continue these resolutions on campus and other activities. So we need to be prepared.
100%. 100%. I agree. I think you bring up some great points. I mean, working together with partners is incredibly important. You mentioned Stand With Us, but the Israel on Campus Coalition is an important partner of ours. They're kind of the umbrella of the pro-Israel campus communities. They bring everyone together to speak about what's going on. So when an incident happens on campus, we're speaking with professionals from across the board to be able to learn about what's going on, see what the students need, see what faculty might need, and then what ACF can do to take part as well, of course, which is what we as the professional staff do, and then share it, of course, with our lay leaders such as Naomi at Brown, et cetera. There's a question that just popped up about, professors, with problematic professors on campuses, what has been an organizational attempt What can we do as alumni? So we work with some partners on campuses. In fact, during the beginning of our webinar series last year, you can go to our website and look at it. We had Asaf Romarasky, who's the president of SPME, Scholars for Peace in the Middle East. And they bring together different faculty to counter what's going on campuses through a faculty perspective. Same with the Academic Engagement Network and with Miriam Ellman, who's at Syracuse University. She's on a leave of absence and working for AN. She's been a phenomenal leader as well. And we all work together in tandem to, see what's going on the faculty level, work with, Stand With Us, Hillel, Chabad, et cetera, to see what the students are going on, what's going on with the students on campus. And then we bring it together with the alumni. So we kind of are the last part of that tapestry that hasn't been worked on before. And I think it's important that we all are able to work together. I also think, Naomi, you brought up a great point about high school. There's many high school programs that actually are bringing high school students kind of up to par so that when they do go to universities, unlike when you and I were going to university, they're more prepared and they're ready to have these hard conversations. And so we kind of see it as, you start at high school, you are on campus and working with all these different pro-Israel groups, and then you come to ACF and you can be just as much of a leader at ACF. And we're thrilled to have many of those instances where we have that leadership through our alumni perspective. There's a lot of room for improvement and for growth, and we're here to make that happen. Naomi, we have a question for you that came up and says, what tools do you think that you would have needed on Brown that would have helped you? Like, what are there other tools that you could have utilized in countering BDS at Brown? What was missing? What do you think Brown could have done better, I guess you can say, et cetera. I'll leave it at that.
Sure. So like I said, I had all the, background that one could hope for. You don't learn about Israeli politics and how to be a pro-Israel advocate, in my experience, at Solomon Schechter in Jewish day school, going to Jewish day school and, in Israel, even living with Israeli family. None of that teaches you how to be a college student at Brown, unfortunately. I also studied abroad in Madrid during at the time it was the Iraq War, the Second Intifada. Again, I was unprepared to live abroad in a very anti-Semitic and anti-Israel environment. So what I discovered at Brown at the time in 2002 and 2003 was the David Project. Someone introduced me to it. I went to a lecture and I just was in awe because I learned all these very, very basic things that I didn't know, and all these talking points, very, very simple explanations of the map of the Middle East and basic historical facts, and reading the book Myths and Facts, and learning about some of these experts on Israel like Mitch Bard and Alan Dershowitz and others who, I could follow and I could learn from, and just having pretty basic workshops and seminars. At the time it was in person, now it can be online or wherever. A lot of these groups, like Avi mentioned, didn't exist, like the Israel on Campus Coalition. Actually, my boss right now is Wayne Firestone, who helped start that group with Hillel. There's all these groups now that didn't exist at the time. Like I said, social media didn't exist at the time. Most people didn't even have cell phones. So there's all these tools now that didn't exist back then. So they were, not even in the arena. But I think just having like a one-stop shop, if that's ICC, that's great. And then students should know that ICC exists. I don't know exactly how they're sort of trained to know about ICC when they enter campus, or if Hillel sort of has like a welcome packet, or something, or some sort of welcome training for those students who want to be pro-Israel activists. But I think there needs to be some sort of easy way to acculturate and welcome students on campus, not on day one saying, okay, you're at Brown now, here's how to defend Israel. But, making sure they're aware of opportunities, and making sure they have a place to go when things arise. And if they do want to get involved with BSI or whatever pro-Israel activity, they know how to access it, and they know how to access that education. Because unfortunately, back when I was a student, I had to do it all myself. There wasn't that sort of information and that sort of cohort available to me. So I think it's great that it exists now, but it needs to be very, very organized and well sort of presented to both current and incoming students.
I think it's a great idea to put some type of packet together. It depends on, certain Hillels have those. I know ITC has their own Grinspoon Fellows that are on campuses, so they have that. But, I remember when I went to Binghamton, I had some idea because our Hillel director, who's fabulous, was able to um, direct us to like those different opportunities. Um, we're going to wrap this up with one more comment, and then we'll just give it a wrap. So Lori, I see that you said that your daughter is pro-Israel and goes to private liberal high school. She's constantly taking on people with their misperceptions and attacks on Zionism. She's very articulate and well-versed, but she finds that people have opinions that are entrenched. On the other side doesn't really want to listen. You bring up, a really interesting point, which is, we can be as educated and as articulate as we want to be, but unfortunately, that doesn't always do the trick. I would argue that what your daughter is doing that's so first of all heroic is, she's standing up for the truth, she's standing up for what's right, and number one. But number two is she's educating those around who maybe don't know as much. A lot of times we always say that, you're talking to, you're having a conversation with a detractor who's never going to change their view, but there could be someone walking by who's listening and finds what you're saying to be compelling and interesting. And it's an opportunity to educate. And that's how you have to look at it. I'm happy to connect, Laura, your daughter to a high school partner of ours who would do well in working with, who works specifically with high school students, but I do think that, that's the kind of the angle you have to look at it as. You can talk to someone, no one's going to change my mind that Israel shouldn't exist, because Israel should exist. But I love to have the conversation. I love to move on and to be able to have others hear what I have to say, because I think that my argument is quite compelling, logical, and it could be helpful to others who just simply don't know, which is the majority of people who are listening. They just don't know. They don't know what's going on. They don't know the reality on the ground. They've never been to Israel. They don't know, the truth. Anyways, we're gonna wrap up. I'd like to end it with some recommendations that we have, some tangible things that you can all do. So first of all, I think what's most important that Naomi mentioned before was keeping yourself informed about what's happening. Naomi is obviously very tapped into what's happening at Brown as our chapter leader, but even if you're not a part of the leadership, look at what's going on your campuses. I still read my school newspaper because I want to see what's going on, what's happening, what's new on campus, etc. But then also when things do happen, we have our we don't have our head in the sand. We know what's going on. Another way of getting involved is joining our Campus Connect network, which is at ACF campusconnect.org, I believe. Yes, acfcampusconnect.org. And that's a platform to be able to share, or we're going to share news about what's going on campuses. You can share your ideas with others. You can meet like-minded members of our network, not just from your alma mater, but anywhere really within our ACF network. If you want to talk lawyer to lawyer, doctor to doctor, whatever it might be, you're welcome to. Nonprofit executive, Naomi and I. It's a great opportunity for everyone to engage with one another. It's really well done, and I encourage you all to sign up on it to be able to be in the know. Like I mentioned before, search university's name in the news, see if you can see anything on Google, what's going on, set a Google alert for what's going on. Think about relationships you've had with faculty or administration you formed when you're in school. If they're still there, it's still pertinent. Reconnect with some influential people you may have lost touch with. It's a great opportunity to reestablish the relationship. So when something does happen on campus, you're there. Of course, join an ACF chapter. If one does not exist on your alma mater, you can reach out to us at info@campusfairness.org, and we're happy to get one started. We're always looking to grow. We started out at about 2,500 members a few years ago. We're at just shy of 10,000 now. So we're very proud of our growth and hope that we can continue to grow. If something happens, we can start a petition. If there's some mishandling of an anti-Semitic incident, writing op-eds are always very influential and helpful, to put in the campus newspaper and newsletters, expressing your view as a Jew, as a Zionist, etc. We've done that many times. At Michigan a few years ago, we did that, and it's quite successful because it shows another side of the conversation. Spearhead meetings with university leaders. This kind of goes back to my third point, which is reconnecting with influential people or administration or faculty. It's important to have these conversations with administration before anything happens, so that when something does, we can go back and have the conversation with them because we already have a relationship with them. Of course, as a kind of like a last resort, consider withholding donations from your alma mater if it fails to do what it says it's going to do as a university. It fails to protect Jewish students and explain. We know when someone's reaching out to you that's asking for donations from Brown or from Binghamton, where I went, and you don't want to give, explain why, because they'll listen and they'll write it down and they'll share it with the department there, so that they can share with the administration and understand that things are happening on campus. We need to be more aware of what's going on and need to make a change. Through our Campus Connect platform, as mentioned before, there's a great opportunity to mentor current students, offer them support, guidance on how to combat anti-Semitism, or just guidance in general. It's a great opportunity there. So connect with older or younger alumni to see how you can support each other and collaborate during this time. As I mentioned before, we're going to be having a virtual conference in the coming months, and I think it's a great opportunity to stay connected on top of our Campus Connect. Yeah, I think this guide to protect Jewish students is really just kind of bringing it all together, understanding what's going on over the last few years, and what we can be doing to better ourselves as a community, as a network. Naomi, I don't know if you want to add anything else or have any closing thoughts you'd like to share before we leave.
Definitely. So like I said earlier, I do try to stay in touch with people from Brown. I have tried to engage a lot of my friends who went to Brown, either my year or other years. It's been very hard for me because I think a lot of people are complacent and, I don't want to say ignorant, but just have other priorities, have other things going on in their lives. So if anyone does, like Avi said, have people that they know in their lives, either from Brown or from any other campus really around the country, who has the energy and the interest in getting involved in any capacity, please connect them with us. We're always looking for more, activists or people who can even do something very simple, like write a letter, or make a phone call, or withhold a donation where appropriate, or whatever it might be. I'm also more than happy to speak to any parents, students, alumni, rising students, or whoever, if I can be helpful in any way. For instance, if someone wants guidance on starting a group like Brown Students for Israel on their campus, or other groups that they can connect with. I'm very, very tapped into the pro-Israel community, both in New York and in other communities around the country. And just lastly, thanks for giving me this opportunity, and thank you to ACF for all the work that you do. It's great to see the organization growing and thriving. We always need to be vigilant. We always need to be working on this issue. It's probably not going away, unfortunately, but I am really grateful that there's been so much created for students and alumni since I graduated in 2003. I wish it had all existed when I was a student, but I'm glad it exists now for current students. So thank you.
100%. And Naomi, thank you for your leadership and for spearheading our Brown chapter. And we thank you all for your time. If you have any questions, feel free to email us. I know Joel, our associate director, just put his email address in the chat. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, we are happy to continue the conversation offline. In the meantime, thank you all for being here. Thank you, Naomi, for sharing your thoughts. It's been really, really eye-opening, I hope, for all of us. And we look forward to virtually seeing you all soon. We thank you and have a good evening.